Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to Granny B's house. You know, I'm recording this book in December, and I don't know what you celebrate during the holiday season, but at Granny B's house, we celebrate Christmas. So, as long as you're remembering to be kind and to give from your heart, it just doesn't matter what holiday you're celebrating. But my little friend Virginia, she celebrates Christmas. And this book I'm going to read, it's kind of long, and it comes from a long time ago. It's called, Yes, Virginia, There is a Santa Claus. It's written by Chris Plehall, and it's illustrated by James Bernardin. And you can tell by these pictures that it comes from a long time ago. Let's read about Virginia and her Santa Claus. Christmas time is full of joy and happiness, usually. But one year long ago, Christmas wasn't very happy at all. Times were hard in New York City, and the weather was especially cold. People hurried through the streets, bundled up against the chill. No one stopped to smile or say hello. Christmas was just a few weeks away, but nobody even seemed to notice. Nobody, that is, except for a girl named Virginia. Virginia loved Christmas. She loved the glittering lights. She loved the joyful carols. But most of all, she loved Santa Claus. She could hardly wait for Christmas Eve when she would set out a plate of cookies and listen for sleigh bells. This year, she even made her very own Santa Claus book. Wow! Virginia's best friend Ollie exclaimed as he looked at the book. We should show Tom and Taylor and George. Come on, let's go. Virginia was a bit nervous about showing it to everybody, but Ollie was already running down the stairs, so Virginia grabbed her book and followed him out the door. At the park, the other children gathered around to see Virginia's book. Everyone was so excited they shouted all at once. Last year, Santa bought me a train set, said Tom. He brought me a dollhouse, exclaimed Taylor. I got a baseball mitt, shouted George. Did Santa bring you a baby bottle too, said a voice. Charlotte, the meanest, bossiest, snootiest girl in town, pushed her way forward. You still believe in Santa, Charlotte scoffed. Ha! That's hysterical. No one could travel the whole world in one night. That's not true, said Virginia. Santa is as real as you are. It's baby stuff, teased Charlotte as she grabbed Virginia's Santa Claus book. With a laugh, she held it high above her head. Give it back, said Virginia. Stop it, shouted Ollie, rushing to help. But Ollie tripped and bumped into Virginia, who crashed into Charlotte, who lost her grip on Virginia's book, which landed in the mud with a splat. Charlotte laughed out loud. Face it, Virginia, she sneered. There's no Santa Claus. Virginia cradled the wet, muddy book in her hands. She knew in her heart that Charlotte was wrong. There is a Santa Claus, she thought to herself, and I'm going to prove it. That afternoon, Virginia visited a place she knew was full of answers, the New York Public Library. Let's see. Santa Claus, said the friendly librarian as she pulled book after book from the shelves. Ah, in England, his name is Father Christmas. In Holland, he's called Sinterklaas, read Virginia. In Italy, he's Babbo Natale, Ollie cried. According to this, said the librarian, flipping through a heavy book, he lives in Finland. No, wait, Greenland. And he has a giant goat, shouted Ollie. Virginia looked at the piles of books on the table. She was frustrated. This is all interesting, she said, but none of it tells me if Santa is real. That evening, Virginia passed through Herald Square in the heart of the city. A man with a beard and a red hat stood on the corner. Virginia's heart leaped. But the man was skinny and scraggly, and his beard was tied up with string. You're not Santa Claus, said Virginia. That's true, I'm not, replied the man. Then why are you dressed like him? Virginia asked. I suppose you could say I work for him, said the scraggly Santa. I try to do whatever Santa would do if he was here. The man jingled a rusty old bell. He was collecting money for the poor. Shouldn't you be wearing a coat? Asked Virginia. Well, I had one, replied the man, but someone needed it more than I did. He gave his coat to this woman with the baby. That's a very kind thing to do. I bet that's something Santa Claus would do. That night, Virginia asked her father, is there really a Santa Claus? He began. Well, someone brought you presents last year, and someone ate the milk and cookies you set out. So logically, but Virginia wasn't listening to her father's long-winded explanation. She was looking at something on her father's desk. It was a copy of the New York Sun newspaper. That's it, Virginia cried. I could write to the newspaper. Well, yes, I suppose you could, said her father. After all, if you see it in the Sun, it's so. Virginia went straight to her desk. She took out a pencil and paper and she began to write a letter. Dear editor, she wrote, some of my little friends say there is no Santa Claus. Papa says if you see it in the Sun, it's so. Please tell me the truth. Is there a Santa Claus? Virginia smiled. She knew that when the Sun received her letter, the editor would surely give her the answer she needed. A few days later, Virginia's letter arrived at the newspaper office. Santa Claus, growled Francis Church, editor of the Sun. This is preposterous. We report facts, not fantasies. Oh, I don't know, sir, said Lewis, Mr. Church's assistant. Maybe you should answer it. Lewis, people rely on this paper for truth. We need to maintain our credibility. But she's only a child, Lewis pleaded. Everyone grows up sometime, Mr. Church said coldly. He tossed Virginia's letter down the garbage chute, which shut with a loud clang. Meanwhile, Virginia sat in her room and moped. She'd been waiting and waiting, but hadn't heard back from the newspaper. I just need some proof, Virginia sighed. Virginia, her mother said, believing in Santa isn't something you prove. It's something you do. Whenever we act like Santa Claus would and are kind to others, that proves he's real. Virginia thought about that, and then she remembered someone else who acted like Santa Claus. Suddenly, she had an idea. The next day, Virginia brought Scraggly Santa a Christmas present. A new coat, he exclaimed, just what I needed. Thank you, Virginia, said Virginia. Well, Virginia, today you're Santa Claus. And even though Scraggly Santa was the one wearing the coat, Virginia felt all warm inside. Isn't that adorable, said a familiar voice. Virginia turned to see Charlotte standing nearby. On her face was a nasty smile, and in her hand was a crumpled letter. I found this outside the newspaper office, Charlotte said, in a garbage can. Oh, Virginia felt a hole in the pit of her stomach. The newspaper had thrown her letter away. She couldn't believe it. With tears in her eyes, she ran away as fast as she could. That night, Scraggly Santa burst into Mr. Church's office. This letter was written by a friend of mine, said Scraggly Santa. I think you'd better answer it. I'm sorry, but I only print the facts, replied Mr. Church gruffly. When people believe, they make the world a better place, said the Scraggly Santa. Answer that letter and you'll give this girl and maybe this whole city something to believe in. Well, that night, Mr. Church didn't go home. Long after everyone else was asleep, he sat in his office thinking about what Scraggly Santa had said. If you see it in the sun, he mumbled to himself, it's so. Virginia wasn't sleeping either. She felt like everything she loved, presents, Christmas, Santa Claus, just didn't matter anymore. Baby stuff, she sniffed sadly. The next morning at breakfast, Virginia stared at her porridge. She didn't feel like eating. She didn't feel like doing anything at all. Virginia's parents were worried. They had never seen their daughter so upset. But then there was a knock at the door. Look, shouted Ollie as he held up a newspaper. Virginia gasped as she read the headline. She couldn't believe her eyes. In the paper was an editorial, a message written just for her. Virginia, your little friends are wrong. They do not believe except for what they see. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. He exists as certainly as love and generosity and devotion exist. How dreary would the world be if there was no Santa Claus? It would be as dreary as if there were no Virginias. There would be no childlike faith then, no poetry, no romance. The eternal light with which childhood fills the world would be extinguished. No Santa Claus? Thank God he lives, and he lives forever. 1,000 years from now, Virginia, nay, 10 times 10,000 years from now, he will continue to make glad the heart of childhood. Virginia had never been as happy. There was a magical feeling inside her bursting to get out. Merry Christmas, she shouted to the streets below. Merry Christmas, replied an old man who was passing by. He had rosy cheeks, a snowy white beard, and a twinkle in his eye. The old man reached into his coat and handed something to Virginia. It was her Santa Claus book, as good as new. Oh my, what a gift! With a tip of his hat, the old man continued on his way. Virginia smiled as she watched him go, and as she stood on the step, book in hand, Virginia thought, the whole world seemed to glow a little brighter. Oh my goodness, such wonderful kindness, such kindness exhibited by everyone, by Virginia giving the scraggly Santa a new coat, well, by the scraggly Santa giving his coat away to that cold woman and her baby, by the editor of the newspaper printing that wonderful editorial. There's just, the holiday season gives us so many reasons to be kind and to believe, you know, whether it's Santa Claus or whoever you worship and believe in. There's a reason. There's a reason for this season, and I'm not gonna preach to you or anything here because that's not what Granny B does. Granny B just wants you to remember to be kind to everyone and to share that kindness with people you don't even know. A smile. Just let them know you care. That's the wonderful thing about this season. We all have an opportunity to let people know we care. So you remember that Granny B cares a whole lot about you, and I hope you'll come see me again real soon. Bye-bye.